Okay, so I think we will just wait for a couple seconds, see if there are more people joining. Okay, we have one more person joining. Okay, so now it's already 12:31 p.m. I think that's the perfect time for us to start this webinar today. So hello everyone, my name is Cindy Chow. I am the International Recruitment and Transition Officer. Thank you very much for joining us today at the webinar. So today we are going to talk about the MD application for international student. So it's my great honor to have my colleague Hannah Lee here today. So Hannah worked in the MD enrollment services. So Hannah, thank you very much for joining us today. I understand you have participated a number of webinars. So for people who are watching this webinar today, do you mind to just talk about a little bit about yourself and what you do in the MD enrollment services?
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Hannah. As Cindy has introduced me, I work, so my role here in the office is Associate Registrar, Admissions and Registration. So anything that pertains to admissions to students' registration and graduation, I take care of the students' concerns and requests, and then anything else that requires you to be successful here in the MD program.
All right, thanks, Hannah. So Hannah, as you know that I went to a number of education fair, and I talked to a number of outstanding international applicants who are interested in the MD program. So I collected questions from them, and today I have 12 questions in total. So I'm going to ask these questions on their behalf, and you can share your valuable insight from the admissions perspective. Okay, and also at the same time, I want to let people know that if you're watching this live webinar, we do have a Q&A session at the very end. If you have any question, you're welcome to type in your question in the comment box. So we will address your question at the very end during the Q&A session. So before we jump into the question, I'd like to point out a few facts which is a fact that I'm so proud of. So University of Toronto ranked as #1 in Canada, according to Times Higher Education. And our clinical medicine ranked as #6 worldwide, according to US News and Education Report. So Toronto is one of the largest diverse city in the world, and we are the 4th largest city in North America. Okay, so Hannah, my very first question to you is, at University of Toronto Medical School, how do we define international students?
Right, and so this is a question that we often get because Toronto being a diverse city with students from everywhere, we, for the purpose of admissions and registration, define international applicants and students as those students who do not have the Canadian citizenship or the Canadian permanent resident status.
Okay, so that's the students who do not have Canadian permanent resident status and Canadian citizenship.
Right, and so one sort of exclusion that I want to hear just as a special note, some applicants who apply through our program as convention refugees, we will treat these candidates as domestic applicants.
All right, thank you. So, and I also want to know that what's the minimum requirement for the international applicants?
Right, so we have the same admissions requirements for both domestic and international applicants. We have what's called an academic requirement that includes your minimum degree requirement. So for those of you who are studying in Canadian school but are international students, that means you have to complete at least 3 years in a direct entry undergrad programs like life sciences, sociology, commerce, engineering, and what have you. If you are studying outside of Canada or US and are completing systems in Europe, South America, Asia, and different places, we're looking for what's equivalent to a Canadian 4-year bachelor's degree at an undergrad level, and it has to be assessed at a direct entry level. And so those of you who are applying, you would normally get this type of assessment through a program services called World Education Services. And as part of your application, they will provide the course-by-course assessment of your degree, along with your GPA and your degree type that you get in the West evaluation.
Okay.
And then just to talk a little bit, this second part of our admissions requirement involved the non-academic requirements. And so these involve the application materials that you would put together as part of your OMSAS material. That's autobiographical sketch and the 3 statements based on your 3 significant activities, the 3 letters of reference, and the 4 brief personal essays. And so these are the exact same admissions requirement that we require for all of our applicants, domestic and international.
Okay, thank you. So you actually touched base a little bit about my next question, is that in terms of the application process, so will you treat international applicants different than domestic applicants? I understand you already talked about the having the transcript being evaluated by WES. So for international applicants, do they have to provide English language proficiency test result as part of their application?
Right, that's a really good question. So as an international applicant, you are treated and evaluated exactly the same as domestic candidates. That means you also don't have to supply TOEFL, COPA, or other types of English proficiency test results, because you are already, as part of your admissions application, writing the MCAT and supplying us your scores. And one of the MCAT sections, critical analysis and reasoning section, gives us a strong indication of your communication skills. And then we also get to test your communication skills at an interview stage. We get to read your essays at the file review stage. So we feel that there's plenty of occasions where we can understand your communication style and skills, and we will not require that extra test.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So, and the next question is asked by not just an international student, but also a lot of other domestic students. So does U of T and the program give preference to the U of T students?
Right, that's also a good question. U of T Medical School being a largest medical school in Ontario, we recruit students from everywhere because we're looking to educate diverse group of future physicians who can serve all various types of healthcare needs that are arising in the city of Toronto and beyond. And so we are literally looking for students from everywhere, and we do not give preference to any university or any programs.
Perfect. So the very next question is, my understanding is the application to the MD program that a student have to provide a number of supporting documents. So for international students, do they have a different application deadline?
Right, that's a good question too, because it does take a little bit longer, right, if you're an international applicant, to read through our materials and send us those documents. The document deadline is the same, October 1st for the main OMSAS application deadline, and if you're a graduate applicant, October 5th for the CV portion. And so if you are overseas, let's say you're in Europe, and you need to have your referee mail in a physical copy of the reference letter, you want to build an extra 2 weeks into your preparation period and remind your referees of this so that everything can arrive by our October 1st deadline.
Okay. So, and the next question is more detailed in terms of the supporting documents. So when the admission committee review the autobiographical sketch material, so how will you treat the verifiers who are abroad?
That's right. And so autobiographical sketch, where they list 32 activities they've done since the age of 16. Many times our international candidates will have verifiers who are abroad and not actually operating in the Eastern Daylight Savings Time that we're here in Toronto. And so what we'll do in those cases is that we will email our verifiers first, just to make sure that we can find a convenient time to call and have this brief conversations around your activities if you have any questions. And we'll make sure that it's at a convenient time for your verifier who are not necessarily here in the Toronto time. And this applies for our Canadian candidates too, who may have done activities outside of Canada and their verifiers are operating in a completely different time zone.
Okay, so you will make multiple attempts if the first attempt doesn't success. Okay, that's great. So, and also as the MD applicant, My understanding is that everyone has the option to write the academic explanatory essay to explain their extenuating situation, if any. So what would you suggest applicants to write in their academic explanatory essay, particularly for international students?
Right. And so, this academic explanations essay, when you log into your OMSAS account and go through the Toronto portion of the application, this is in fact an optional essay. Not every candidate may have extenuating circumstances that they want to talk about, but some of the international students who are transitioning to Canada have never been to Canada and have transitioned to Canada as a first-year undergraduate student. You may have had some transition struggles, or you had some new study skills that you had to implement as you were arriving to a new country, new city, new environment. And so that's something that will be under control, especially if there's a language and cultural barriers. You just want to briefly highlight your experience, just to talk a little bit about what your experience with transition has been. We will look at your essay responses and provide special consideration where necessary. Some students, their circumstances go beyond this extenuating circumstance, where they have had medical reasons or other very extenuating personal circumstances where they were the primary caregivers of their family members, where they had different disruptions in their study that were beyond their control. They also are encouraged to write a brief note about what the experience has been like with the time frame of when this experience has taken place, and so that we can go into your transcript to have a better understanding of how this has impacted your studies and apply the consideration.
Okay, so my understanding is this part is completely optional for applicants. But if they have any extenuating situation, if they have any situation is beyond their control, which potentially impact their academic performance, that we are encouraging them to outline the detail and also the situation in this essay. Is
That's
that correct?
Right. Yeah, and some students, they may ask questions just around, is this a eligible circumstance in your perspective? So before you put together the essay itself, feel free to reach out to me directly. We can have a conversation around what has in the past has been accepted by our review committee. I'm happy to go over through some of our guidelines with you so that you can put together your material a little bit more clearly, to make our review process itself very, very convenient and smooth for us as well.
Okay, great. So the next question is the secondary screening. So as I understand, the admission process is that the first step is after students submit all the supporting documents, we are doing an in-depth file review. So my question is, like, after the in-depth file review process, then successfully candidate will be invited for a modified personal interview. And I want to know more about the MPI interview versus the MMI interview format. Can you elaborate on the differences between the MPI and the MMI interview format?
Right. I'm just going to jump a little bit back just to highlight our admissions process in detail too, for those of you who are new to the Canadian admissions process. So at University of Toronto, you are currently probably preparing to meet our October 1st application deadline, where you get all of the responses and documents in for us. Based on the materials that you have provided us by October 1st deadline, we complete the screening like you've described, just on is everything in by the October 1st deadline. If you're a graduate student, do we have your CV that you uploaded separately? Based on the screening that we complete, we'll send those eligible candidates, so those who have met our minimum requirements, to our in-depth file review. The in-depth file review is based on the non-academic materials that you provided us that I've highlighted a little bit at the beginning about your autobiographical sketches, your essays, and your letters of reference. And those who have been scored high and our top 600 plus applicants will then attend our interview process, known as a modified personal interviews. And so modified personal interviews, MPI, was specifically developed for the University of Toronto in 2014. We've done a pilot a little bit before that, but since then we've had a very successful 5 cycles of the MPI process. And what it is it's a new process in that we're taking away the interviews from a traditional panel interview where a candidate sat in front of a room and there were a couple of faculty members and medical students, and you've gone through an hour-long interview, we actually stripped that and specifically allocated time in that 1 hour. So the total time is still the same, but you are now going into independent rooms where you are specifically assessed on a competency that we mapped out for each room. And in each room, there is only one interviewer. This is based on the multiple independent sampling format that we've implemented. And so the traditional interview format, the downside of things such as halo effect that students used to encounter, they're no longer having that. So we're hoping that in this one-on-one interaction, you're truly being assessed on the competency that we are aiming to measure in that room. And as an applicant, if you stumble in one station, it doesn't matter because everyone's completing rating independent from one another. And so you still have plenty of chances in the other 3 stations to do better. And we found that that was in greater advantage to our applicants to make sure that they had a bias-free interview experience throughout 4 stations. The MMI, very similar. It's also based on a circuit of a specific number of stations, and the number of stations depends on the university itself. It could range anywhere from 7 stations to 11 stations. In each room or in each station, they also measure a specific set of competency. And similar to MPI, they're measuring skills that are interpersonal, soft skills beyond the traditional things that we're looking for and that we get out of the GPA and the MCAT. And whatnot. We want to know a little bit more about our candidates outside of that paper school environment where we get a glimpse of how you will be with your patients as clinicians in the future. So both processes are fairly new, but have been very successful and are strongly based on the multiple independent sampling ideals. If you have more questions around our MPI process, we actually have done an annual blog posting that you may want to check out on our admissions website, and also email our team for questions.
Yeah. So I also have a question. This is coming from my end. Is that when people do the MPI interview, so this is a one-on-one conversation. So after each section, will they have an opportunity to ask a question to the interviewer?
Absolutely. So typically the interview lasts 12 minutes. And once you go through the set of questions that we prepare for our raters, you have time to ask questions about Toronto, what it's like to be a medical student. And each circuit is comprised of faculty members, residents, students, and community members. So you'll get plenty of chance to ask your questions from their perspective of what it's like to be a physician, resident, student, and a patient in the University of Toronto medical community.
Okay, so that's a conversational interaction at the end. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. And when we are talking about the interview, so as we are accepting international students to the MD program, so I'm thinking the international students could be from like US, could be from Europe or Asia. And I wonder in terms of timeline, when will the international applicants receive the invitation to the MPI interview?
Right. This is a great question just because our students who are abroad, they need a little bit more time to make travel arrangements. If they need to obtain a study or a visitor's permit, we usually have seen students taking a little bit longer to obtain this document. And so what we try to do is we try to send out our invitation to international candidates anytime between the beginning of February and sometimes as early as January to ensure that you have plenty of time to make the travel arrangements. We also will let you pick from the list of 6 interview days, which is the most viable option for you to make the trip to Toronto. We understand that sometimes you may not be in Canada and you need that time to think about the most convenient trip date for you, and we'll work with you to make sure that you can make it in time.
Okay, and also I'm thinking for the international applicants, like some of the international applicants, they could already in Canada, so they are studying in an undergraduate degree in Canada. So if they have any exam conflict, or if they have religious reason, are we providing any accommodation towards the time conflict?
Absolutely. So at U of T, we have 6 interview days. And so as international candidates, we try to get our invitations out as early as late January. And so by that point, most students have fairly good idea when their final exam period will be, and they can tell us which dates that they cannot attend, and whether that's for other personal reasons, religious observances that you're participating in, or your exams. you'll know by that point, late January. And so tell us what day is the most viable option for you, and we'll try our best to accommodate and provide that interview date.
Okay. And Hannah, I wonder, according to your experience, have we done any interview like remotely if the person absolutely cannot make the trip to Toronto?
Right. That's less preferred, just because we want to make sure that you are in the city and you experience what it's like to be a medical student at U of T, take a trip, be in our facilities, but at the same time, sometimes depending on where you are or your personal circumstances, not an interview dates may work from where you are. We have in the past, on very small, finite number of occasions, provided Skype or other types of online interview experiences. And that's not something that will impact your qualitative interviewing experience, just because we try our best to mirror what you will receive on site. But I guess the downside of that is that you don't get to experience the Toronto and our vibrant city. So we still encourage you to try your best to be here on site.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I feel like is on the interview day, so we have a lot of student volunteer, and they can also show the student around, because we do have the tour component during that day for the interviewee.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, as my understanding is that some applicants, they already have a professional degree, such as dentistry or law. So I understand that you have provided a webinar last week talking about the grad review. So I wonder, for this type of degree, let's say dentistry and law, are these being considered as graduate program, graduate degree?
Right. So for the purpose of University of Toronto's MD admissions review, we categorize professional degrees such as law, dentistry, pharmacy as second entry undergraduate programs. And so the candidates coming in from these programs, they will not be getting a grad review. And also, one of the things that I always remind our candidates to do is to make sure you get a WES assessment to understand what your dental degree, what your pharmacy, what your law degree translates to in Canada. So very often, those of you who are potentially thinking about starting in a 5-year direct entry medical degree, very often when the assessment is done, it's not equivalent to a 4-year direct entry undergraduate program such as life sciences or commerce or social sciences in Canada. And so it does not satisfy our degree requirement. Many of you who are currently in the program, but in the past have done some undergraduate study or have already completed a degree, your first degree may already serve to satisfy your degree requirement. And so anytime you have questions around the nuances or just the options that you're considering, email us and we're happy to clarify that for you.
Okay, so we are providing support to all the applicants during their application process. So they can always email us and they can always seek for clarification.
Right, because we want to make sure that before you go to WES, if there's any questions that we can clarify for you on site, we can provide that support.
Okay, that's great. So my next question is, so we talk about when students apply for the program, they support with their supporting documents, and then for the successful candidate, they are invited to the MPI interview. So now I'm thinking about the admission decision. So as I understand, different schools, they may have a different timeline to communicate these admission decisions. So my question is, at U of T, the MD program, so what's the timeline look like when we communicate the admission decision to the international students? Because they do have a lot of other things to arrange. So logistically.
Yeah. So for our regular MD candidates, as usual, they'll hear back on a standard May offer date. But for our 2 specialized streams, so our international and MD PhD stream, our candidates will hear from us offer decisions beginning mid-March, or sometimes even as early as March, depending on your interview date. And then generally our responses are due based on the conditions that we provide for you. For international candidates last year, the offers were made as early as end of March, and the responses are due in May.
Oh, okay. So the last year we started sending out the offer or like other decision beginning of March?
And it's after that, it's we will send out offers to the qualified candidates on a rolling basis, as our MD regular admissions do, until we reach the class size that we're aiming for.
Oh, okay. So I think so far we have already touched base the top 11 questions asked by the international applicants. So the very last question for today is actually the question from my end, is that I want to get some suggestion from you, Hannah, that what would you suggest to the international applicants when they apply to the MD program here?
Right. I think in terms of preparing the application part, I encourage you to also review the video we prepared for our larger poll, just in terms of how to navigate the application experience, but specifically from a perspective of an international candidate. It's always important for you to imagine what it's like to be a medical student in Canada, and especially in Toronto. If you are able to visit us prior to the application cycle, you can book an appointment with Cindy here or our other recruitment staff in our office, just to have that Toronto experience and what it's like to study in Canada. The other side of the application process as an international student that I have emphasized in some of our other sessions as well is the deadlines.
Yes.
Sometimes the postal service in various countries sort of operate on a very different timeline, and so if you are encountering any issues where you have sent out your documents far in advance of our document deadline, but your postal notice tells you that it's not really here in Canada, let us know. Save any copies of your postal receipts, just so that we can work with you to sort of track that material, but also give you extensions if for some reason the documents become lost, or you need to double check with your country's postal service. It does happen, but we have in the past worked with our applicants to make sure that those issues can be addressed for the candidates. The other question that I always get a lot from our candidates is that in terms of our competencies, we follow a very clearly mapped out competencies that are called attribute clusters, and these are on our website. And some of the languages or some of the terminologies that we're using to describe, for example, our leadership or advocacy or some of the scholarly work may not be as familiar in your country, or it maybe uses slightly differently in a different term. We're happy to clarify that for you, just so that it's a little bit more clear as you're putting together your materials. I understand, especially even among the English-speaking countries, some of the languages or terminologies are used a little bit differently depending on your context or your educational background. So we're really happy to go over those points with you, just so that as you're preparing your application, you're maximizing your understanding of the Canadian admissions experience.
Okay, that's great. So yeah, and also I also want to emphasize that the application deadline, because the MD program, we ask you to provide a lot of information. It is very important for you to be very clear about the application deadline, because you have to get yourself prepared for your essays, and you also need to contact your referee to provide the reference letter in time. So definitely bookmark the application deadline and to allow yourself sufficient time to get yourself prepared for the MD application. So now I think we can open up the window for the Q&A. So for people who are watching this webinar live, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to type in your question in the comment box, and we are here to answer your question.
Cindy, what's a typical campus tour experience like for those candidates who are visiting Toronto for the very first time?
For the very first time, what I noticed that when people come to this office, they want to get more information about the MD program. And when they hear that our MD program is highly ranked worldwide, then they are always very impressed by our curriculum. And from my experience is that a lot of students, they really, really like the MPI interview format, which is the part I also want to highlight right here. Because when we are doing recruitment, we want to find the qualified candidate. We want to know them in the individual level. So we are here to provide ongoing ongoing support, like you mentioned that at the very beginning, that we're here to provide a support for you to understand the program and for you to decide if this is the right program for you. And also at the same time, we respect each candidate. So we want to gather more information on an individual level. So as a mutual understanding and also as a mutual decision. So this is what we are doing as a reminder.
What's a number one UT campus facility that you generally take all the, I guess, tour candidates to? Is there a one building or one location that you recommend candidates to take a visit?
So I would say the starting point is definitely the medical science building.
Okay.
It is here. So the medical science building, the part the students like about it is first, like it's in the center of the campus. So Faculty of Medicine, we also have another 13 graduate unit. The reason I bring it up is that some students, when they come to the MD program, they are also interested in the other option, which is the MD PhD program.
Yep.
So they do have access to visit a different graduate unit because all the graduate units are within the same building. So they can get hand-on experience about the subject and also the research topic, or they can even visit the graduate office to get more information. So to answer this question short, if someone comes here, they want to know the MD program and they want to know Faculty of Medicine in general, definitely the medical science building is the first stop. And I also want to emphasize that our enrollment services, we are located in this building and our room number is 2124. So we are here to help you understand the program and we are here to clarify anything that you are not quite familiar in terms of the application process. So our office open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday, Friday, except for July and August, we close a little bit early. We close at 4:30. So if you have any questions during your application, or if you want to gather more information, you're always welcome to drop in. And one of my colleagues or myself would be happy to give you advice or having a conversation to answer any questions you have.
Excellent. So why don't we ask for one more sort of opportunity to collect questions from our candidates, and then we can answer any questions that you may otherwise think about after the session ends, and we're happy to go over them with you in person, like Cindy suggested, over email or phone as well. So let's wait for a couple more. Great. I think it looks like there is no more questions. So Cindy, I want to thank you for inviting me to this session. I enjoy talking about our admissions process. Can you, for just some of us who are participating here, just quickly go over our email address and our phone number?
Yes, of course. So before we close this session, I just want to re-emphasize our contact information. So our office located in number 1 King's College Circle, and the office name is MD Enrollment Services. Our room number is 2124. So the office open from 9 a.m. and we close at 5 p.m. And during July and August, then we close at 4:30. So you're more than welcome to drop in if you're in Toronto. If you want to make a phone call, our phone number is 416-978-7928. Again, 416-978-7928. And you can always email us if you have any question regarding admission. The email address is medicine.admiss is ADMISS at utoronto.ca.
Before we close, I see that we have one question from Andrew. Andrew, is the MCAT deadline different from the application deadline? And the answer is, it is a little different. And so the latest MCAT seating that would qualify you for this round of application cycle is September 2018 seatings. And so if you are able to get your MCAT exam done at some point this September, you should still make the deadlines, the review deadlines that we need on our end for the 2018-19 year.
That's definitely a great question. Yeah.
So I think we can wrap up now,
Yeah.
right?
All right.
Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much for coming here today, Hannah. I really appreciate your insight from the admissions perspective.
Great. Best of luck on your application.
Yeah, I look forward to see everybody soon. Thank you.